No.
What's the
Basically,
seating?
just start, just wherever you can find a spot.
Yeah.
Just check in with this gentleman.
We have a professor from the university.
All right, you guys. This is crucial, and I'm so excited to be here. We are at what are we at? Bourbon Room, Calgary, for a live event. Pathway to Build a Nation. Very excited to be here tonight. We've got an event with Keith Wilson, Eva Chipiak, and many other great speakers. We're going to come in and we're going to watch this event.
Citizen journalists going against that. So Barry, I'm really so honored that you came tonight to share your perspective. You've been working in the trenches for longer than we remember, or I remember. And we're grateful for your insights at this time. So thanks for hanging in there, mate.
Thank you, Fergus. To go from something gigantic like CBC to something less gigantic. Here is the latest cover from Alberta Views, which I think we will think of as a progressive magazine, Alberta Left-Wing Views.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a quote from me. Of course it's treasonous. Of course it's illegal. And of course we're going to have help from abroad. Now, I'm not sure that that's exactly what I said. But it's close enough. I was listening to Keith a couple of weeks ago up in Edmonton. And he said, and I'm sure he'll make the same point tonight, that it is legal. Independence of Alberta is legal. I think it's extremely difficult, according to the law as it's presently enacted, namely the Clarity Act. But he has another argument that I hope you listen to and quiz him on. That's the first thing. You cannot trust the legacy, but we don't have to. There's this huge amount of social media, informal media that didn't exist, 15 years ago. And that is part of what social movements are today. And certainly the many divided organizations working for Alberta independence exemplify that. And that they're rather like the truckers. It was a grassroots movement, as I'm sure all of you see yourselves as contributing to that. And I said divided. That's not a bad thing. That is something that absolutely freaks out political parties. Mm. We saw it with the truckers when the Prime Minister went off his rocker. And that's the typical party response to major social upheavals. It started, I would say, with the American Revolution. There were no political parties during the revolutionary period, say 1775. There were differences of opinion. There were what Madison called factions, but the parties didn't occur until after the independence of the 13 colonies. The same thing happened throughout the 19th century with the French Revolution, with 1848, and it went into the 20th century with the Russian Revolution. The Soviets were councils, and then they were squished by the Bolsheviks. Some of you may are old enough, I can barely remember 1956 in Hungary. That too was a popular movement, a social movement, a council movement that had no leaders. And that's very important. That is a source of strength, particularly when we have social media that we have today. So my point is that this, when you hear these genuinely treasonous idiots saying that we should form a political party, just like the Bloc or the PQ, they want to get you into their strength. Mm. And it's really stupid. So just don't do it. That can be time for that later. This summer, I think, between now and let's say middle of September, it's going to be very interesting to see what the government of Alberta does. The sort of tactical changes that Danielle announced the other day for October 19th, she may have to change. We'll see what happens, and we'll see what happens particularly when we listen to the Premier of Ontario and the Premier of Quebec, the Premier Ministre of Quebec. The stuff that they will be saying about us in this province will do nothing except irritate Albertans who are not yet aboard the train. And so, don't pay attention to the words. Think, what is the effect of what these people are saying on as yet uncommitted Albertans?
Yeah. And
it'll be all to the benefit of independence. So, don't get upset about it. It'll be very funny because these people are dumber than Zach. And we see it on an almost daily basis by the words of the Prime Minister. I mean, the poor guy has got no clue of what's going on. And I'm sure that he will repeat these kind of really dumb statements all the way up to October 19th. So, things actually look pretty good from the way I see it anyway. But political science is not predictive. I'm not making any predictions. But it'll be very, very interesting. Probably the most interesting period in Alberta's history since the Depression, when Premier Eberhard tried to do something about the Depression and was squished by the Government of Canada with the disallowance and the reservation powers of the Constitution. Who knows what might have happened had Eberhard been able to do what he wanted to do? Who knows what will happen whether Danielle changes horses or somebody else takes her place. But I said to somebody that they got very upset. It was one of the Laurentian media, CTV, it was a couple of days ago. Said it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And if it's not October 19th, the structural problems are not going away. And it's the reason that we were saying earlier, is because of the inability and lack of imagination of Laurentian Canada to actually see Canada as a federation. They have never seen Canada that way. It's always been an imperial regime directed from Ottawa. Whatever federation is there is between Ontario and Quebec, not us. We have been, as Sir John A. said, we are the crown colony of Canada. And having had the misfortune of kissing away 10 years of my life in Toronto with students who I didn't understand, that is still the attitude of Central Canada. So, we know what we want. The problem is they don't know, I would say anything. They don't know anything about their own history. And they certainly don't know anything about ours. So it's going to be a very interesting summer.
Yeah, so we are fortunate to have tonight two people who I see as emergent or de facto leaders in this movement. And I think that's the healthiest way that they've arisen by, let's say, popular support or interest in their work. They have an incredible footprint in terms of content, in terms of explaining what's going on right now. And I'm really glad they accepted my invitations to be here. So I'll bring up Eva Chipiak and Keith Wilson, both attorneys. And so Keith has a focus on constitutional and environmental law. Eva has a new organization, Empowered Canadians. Maybe you want to explain a little bit about that?
So Empowered Canadians was after Freedom Convoy and the conversation around that, I realized that not many people understood how Canada worked, what the political system was and what the legal system was like, and how that worked. When we were just talking about it on the way over here, how a piece of paper was demonized as overthrowing the government. I was like, oh boy, we have a lot of work to do with education. So I actually looked for a book that could give me a little bit of the basic explanations on the history of Canada, the legal and political system, the charter, and how to get civically engaged. I didn't see that in our library, so I'm wondering what on earth kids are reading in school. So I decided to take it up on myself to write that book. And I started an organization called Empowered Canadians, which is just that, to empower Canadians with knowledge and information and use their voice to affect change.
Amen.
Okay, Tig, we obviously have one of the debaters in tonight's Wilson Kenney debate, and I did not get to listen to it since it was not broadcast. But so the first question is basically, are you pleased with tonight's debate in terms of bringing the message you wanted to, or achieving what you wanted to, and how useful are these debate platforms in terms of time allocation?
Well, I always like to start with a lawyer joke. So this guy comes up to me, he says, how much does it cost to ask a lawyer a question? I said, $600. What's your next question? Thanks to those who came out to debate. The format was tough. You get a minute, you get 2 minutes, and I felt like that new kid on the farm with the new pellet gunner 22 and nothing but fence posts with pop cans on them. So which one do I shoot? There were so many points he made. I'm like, that's wrong, that's wrong. Oh, the city of Calgary and the city of Edmonton can hold a referendum and could partition. No, not according to the Supreme Court of Canada. So it's really, I guess it's more important how you guys felt I did than how I did. I tried to be respectful, and I tried to remember that the internet is forever. I was trying to think if there was someone in the room or someone who watches it later and their mind's not completely made up, how could I get them to see what I see with such clarity? So that's what I was doing. I'm not convinced there's going to be another debate. I don't know that Jason's going to want to do that again. I think he felt the first one went similarly at the Civitas. I thought he might back out, but I think he felt he was too leveraged in. I don't think there's going to be another one. But I do think every form of dialogue that we can have to have a dialogue, there's someone in the, how did I say this? I was on, had a really weird experience. I was on CBC twice last week. It was something that's like somebody opened a floodgate. Like normally it's all alternative media, never the legacy media. And then in one day I got requests for interviews from CTV and then 2 from CBC. But I forget my point, it'll come to me. Is that we have to open up a dialogue. I know what I was going to say. Rosemary was trying to box me in. She was trying to get me to say bad things about people and in the movement. And what I said was, it just came to me was, it's kind of like the Toronto Maple Leafs. There's people who are fans and they go to games, and then there's people who paint their faces, right? So of course, in any grouping of people, you're going to have different degrees. But the important piece is that we need to reach out and open up a dialogue, because some of us in this movement, we are too forceful and we're too pushy. We need to find, I think the right approach is to, because you look at the polling, 60% of the people are going to vote no. But a large number of them are really concerned about what Ottawa's doing and are really concerned about the future, and they want change. So find that common point. Well, what is it that Ottawa's doing that's bothering you? And don't rush them, work with them on that. In time, the truth is, the only legal pathway and political pathway to getting the problems that those people will recognize and identify themselves resolved, in my view, is independence. We have leverage over all of these issues. So I do think every form of communication is important, including debates. I'm happy to do them. I don't know that Jason's going to ask again, but I do think it's a useful exercise.
Eva, do you want to few comments on the debate tonight, yeah.
The only thing I was gonna add is listening to Jason Kenney this evening, and he did say some things that were just wrong in law, and this is why I am such a proponent of education, because you can call them, like, even elected officials, guess what? They don't know how the structure works as well. They don't know all of the laws. They were, entrepreneurs and anything, teachers. It doesn't mean that they have the background the day that they become an elected official to know everything. That's part of our education system. It just doesn't teach that. So a number of the points he made today was like, that's not actually correct in law. And it's good to be able to call those people out of meetings. So I just said that.
Okay, so we've touched on this before. We have this serious problem of, let's say, accuracy of information or a board-off press, right? I think it's a real tragedy that the legacy media are so dependent on subsidies at this point. Now, the problem is that we really cannot ignore them because that's what people are receiving. So my next question is basically, if we're going to engage with a media that seem hostile to us, how do we do that in a fruitful manner?
Well, my approach now is I accept every media invitation from legacy. Because the reality is we're only going to reach so many people through social media. We're only going to reach so many people through our highly skilled social media influencers and the podcasters and so on. We've got to break out of that bubble and we've got to reach further. And a lot of people still get their news from the legacy media, the newspapers, the radio, and the television. So I am prioritizing those requests actually. If I get a request to go on a podcast and I get a request to go on CBC, I'll go on CBC first. And part of what I'm trying to do too is break down the narrative, right? They want us all to be the Maple Leafs fan with the painted face. So I won't be putting on any face paint. And because that's the audience we have to reach. We have to reach that demographic within our voting population, that's where they get their information from. So I think we need to embrace it.
I don't disagree. I've never gotten an invitation from the legacy media. In fact, I think it was True North at the time they wrote an article about me being blacklisted by the legacy media. So if any legacy media is listening, I'm very happy to have a conversation. And I think we need it. Like, it's very obvious that the narrative is very biased. And I think we need to, I've called it out. I think everybody has. But if we say, hey, this is somebody that might be able to contribute to the conversation, it's also very strange to see people in Ontario debating Alberta independence without anybody from Alberta debating Alberta independence. So I think we need to maybe make our voices heard a little bit more about that and perhaps not demonize them too. I'm guilty of that as well at times. So that's a strategy we can take, is we'd like to have that conversation with you. Perhaps I myself will put that invitation out and we'll see where it goes.
Keith, do you want to give me points on when you do engage? Do you try to want to do live interviews or the techniques you take?
Yeah, I'm the opposite school. I've in the past dealing with clients that would say to the media, I'll do an interview, but you have to send me a draft first. That means you're not going to be in the story. So I do the opposite. I always tell those who interview me as soon as they get on the phone to turn on the tape, because they'll usually have it on and then the tape turn it on later after getting permission. I treat everything as on the record unless it's expressly discussed to be off the record. The reality is, in my experience dealing with the media in the past, and it's the same today, if the reporter wants to make you look bad, they don't need to interview you to make you look bad. Mm-hmm. If they do interview you, you're just increasing the chance that they will actually tell your side of the story. Most journalists is exactly what they want to do. They can't tell your side of the story if you don't make yourself available to them to tell your side of the story. So I just say go into it with confidence, not hostility. And I never precondition anything. And I always emphasize in my interviews that at the end of the day, this is their story and they will print or broadcast what they think is appropriate.
I should note, we do have a journalist here from the Western Standard, and I really appreciate their publication. Oh, and the National Post, okay, right. Okay, this is a really sensitive topic, but as Dennis mentioned, we're going to want international recognition of Alberta. And the elephant in the room is the United States, and there already are many politicians, media leaders who would be supportive of Alberta independence. How do we, I don't know, engage with them in a fruitful manner that keeps this a grassroots Alberta movement, but also recognizes that, yes, we have an ally waiting for us?
Well, we have to be, there's a few thoughts. First of all is there is a tremendous amount of interest in the United States about what's happening in Alberta. And I know that from data because I got a request a few months ago. I've been on the Glenn Beck radio program a couple times. And if you think me standing off stage and walking on tonight was nervous, imagine realizing that before you go live on Glenn Beck's show, that you're on 400 radio stations across the United States, including their territories in Hawaii, with 8 million people listening to you live, and then many more on rebroadcast. And he's on camera, and I'm literally holding my phone. I can't see anything. So anyway, it's just a little vignette. But it went well, apparently, because there was a couple points when I was telling him, answering his questions about what's happening in Canada, what's driving Albertans, is it went silent. And if you've ever done any radio, there's a rule, no silence. Right, John? No silence. So I actually looked at my phone to see if I'd lost connection. I watched the video after. He literally, his jaw opened once I described various things that were happening in Canada. So after that, there was a clip made of his interview with me. He does the picture and the chyron and the title. He's doing his thing from the studio. And that at the time became his 4th most viral clip in 10 years, including interviewing Donald Trump Jr. So that's not, I don't think it's a reflection of me as much as it's a reflection of the level of interest in the United States as to what's happening to their friends north of the border. They understand, many of them, an increasing number, that I did an interview with Turning Point USA, sent a documentary crew to my office a couple weeks ago, and somehow the current situation in Iran and the release, Trump had released all these barrels of oil from the strategic reserve, and when the Fox and CNN covered it, they had aerial images of these huge tank farms, and big storage tanks, right, of oil. And I said, well, you have the 3rd largest reserve of oil immediately north of your border, and we store it underground so it can't be bombed. Right? But think about that. Think about that. Holy smokes, and with what's going on in the world. So they are keenly interested. And whenever I've been asked by when you're not on tape, you're not live, and they've said, well, what can we do to help? I've said, just leave us alone. Just let us do our thing. Don't interfere. Let Albertans and Canadians work it out. But what you can do is demonstrate what a great neighbor you are and what a great friend you are to Alberta. And I think that's partly why, and not just because I said that it happened, but a good illustration is, and I think I said it in the debate, I can't remember what I said, but I think I might have said that Trump's approved more pipelines than Carney has or something like that. So I really think they need to stay out of it because we know it's a trigger. We saw that's how Carney got elected. If they vocally advocate, then it's going to backfire. I think they need to leave us alone. Let us work this out. Just like if you have a neighboring couple and they're going through a difficult time, you don't stick your head over the fence and say to the wife, yeah, your husband was right. You should have done that. You don't do that. You just, oh, those are nice flowers. Are they new? So I think they need to take the same approach. And I think it's fair for us to engage with the media when they request it and help them understand what's happening in Canada, that there is this legal process for Alberta to become a new country. and what an asset Alberta is in the relationship.
So just building on that a little bit, I totally agree. But I do think that what I am seeing from the United States is obvious interest, but I think they're looking for partnerships with places that they see value in, and obviously Alberta would be one of it. And then I was thinking about that, and during the debate today, we don't have a partner in Ottawa. We don't have a strategic alliance with Ottawa, but you could see that happening with the United States. They value Alberta, they value the resource, they value the hard work. We don't see that partnership with Ottawa. So that would be the messaging I would suggest that Albertans could talk about rather than interfering. And the other thing, I'm actually curious to hear what your thoughts are. Kenney said today that Albertans constantly elect a welfare type state, and he said that in both debates. Was those the words that he used? A welfare, yeah, he used that. And what I note with Canadians is that I think that not in this room, we're kind of like go-getters and we're okay with a bit of risk, but there are quite a number of Canadians that are looking for a bit of a safety blanket. That is the Canadian way. We've got a lot of social programs. So I see if the United States could just present itself as a nice and kind partner, whereas right now we have Ottawa that isn't a very nice partner / safety blanket, because that is where I think a lot of the fear, at least for the middle 30, the last 30, I think there's no point trying to convince, but there's the middle 30 that is like, God, what about my safety blanket? What about the safety net? And I think that could be utilized with the United States and a productive relationship. And from what I'm seeing, the interest, I think is there. We're getting close to that.
I'll just give some comments. People based in Colorado and the family out here in Alberta, and I tend to disagree to some element that it's rising the interest, but still we have so many other topics taking over the news in the United States. The big concern I have about engaging with US media is that they're obviously incredibly interested in the 51st state idea, and I think that's really radioactive, and I'm encouraging them to, as much as possible, dissuade that option, push away from that option when engaging with US media. Okay, so I noted before that even if we have, let's say, very strong economic arguments, very strong arguments for self-determination, that we're up a well-funded and professional political class, and even you might say the establishment conservatives in Canada. And we have basically an army of volunteers, many of them here, who do this as a labor of love or a passion project. And I just wonder, how do we want to continue that way, being an army of volunteers and keeping it somewhat pure grassroots, or somewhat more professionalizing this operation?
Well, if we want to win, we've got to transition. We won't win just by doing it with the, as much as it's admirable, and I've been involved in a number of grassroots initiatives over my career. We're not going to win it by being the little engine that could. We're going to have to match the level of sophistication of the campaigns that the government and the unions, that the Forever Canada, the Vote to Stay group that Jason Kenney and Solbergs and Thomas or Mr. Tays and Jen Gerson have recently announced last week. If we don't transition from an undirected, unstrategic campaign, there's a certain result and it's failure. So I think we absolutely have to transition. We can't fool ourselves. It's not, enthusiasm's terrific, essential, helpful, but we don't need to convince ourselves we're right. We need to convince those who are very busy with their lives. We need to convince those who don't engage with politics. We need to convince those who get their information from legacy media. So I do absolutely think that we need to take advantage of the opportunity to create third-party advertiser groups And one of the things that I'll be announcing later this week is the creation of a new group that is going to be called Alberta's Next Step. So breaking news, a new group will be forming to develop sophisticated campaigns that will take advantage of traditional media as well as social media, that will have a strategy, that will have tools that the volunteers can use to be effective, that will have information and tactics and strategies to help us be successful.
Wow.
Because we basically how we're doing this transition from being pure grassroots, basically volunteer army, to being more of a professional operation.
I understand the question, I just don't know if I want to answer. What bothers me with this is a lot of the other side is using our taxpayer money to fund some of these campaigns. It's like when you're fighting in court against the government and it's
Right.
taxpayer money funding it. So it's very strategic. They know what they're doing. They've done this time and time again. I'm a girl that if there's a problem, I'm ready to help solve it, but I'll leave that one. I'll leave Keith's answer.
It's a tough issue because even though they have public unions funded them and the like, they will accuse us of profiteering, use throw pejoratives at us, which I think are unfair. And the fact is, I agree with Keith that I love the volunteer army. I mean, the energy is amazing, but we're taking on a formidable opponent, and we're going to have to up our game. Okay, and the final question before I'd like to have questions from the audience or engagement, and maybe Benita will. Do you want to set up a line over there? I'll bring a microphone over. Okay, do you want to? Yep, great. It's just we have already a decentralized campaign, but obviously Alberta independence is decentralization. So it fits with our personalities that we have a movement that is decentralized. Are there particular gaps or vacuums in that mosaic where we really need to have new organizations that produce more quantity than just so that they overlooked? I mean, right now, for example, obviously the First Nations leadership challenge is one that I personally not so well versed, but it seems like that's an area that puts a bit more interest. So maybe that's a bit on,
That is one. There's so much misinformation and confusion on that one that makes my head spin.
Sorry, everybody running out.
I definitely think that the urban areas and roads need to be really targeted and Children's movement is doing very well. I think you need to have different messaging and different outlets of speaking to people with different types of demographics, like the Alberta Women's Independence Movement, and I never get that whole name correct. Sorry, Angela, who I know is in the room. Network. Anyway. And so they have a different way of approaching women at the kitchen table, and I think it's a more gentle approach for women. Students going to campuses, and I actually just volunteered myself to go with John, who wears the flag and talks to people on the street, but I want to go to the university because I want to hear what they're saying. So those are two areas, and of course urban, like I mentioned. First Nations, of course, that's a discussion that it just needs to happen because it's become so confused with the court decisions, unnecessarily so. It appears people believe, and even the courts at this point think that there's a veto for First Nations, and that's totally incorrect. So engaging in that conversation, of course, is very important.
I would just add that, one of the things I had suggested in a podcast I did or a YouTube video was that those who are motivated self-organize into functional groups. So, for example, veterans for independence and farmers for independence and First Nations for independence. There is a lot of support in the First Nations community, as every one of you in this room knows. Some of the most active canvassers are First Nations. So that's the way. But you need to understand is the third party, the election finance laws in Alberta are, if I'm trying to find something simple to compare it to, I start reading the Income Tax Act. It is so complicated. So just to give you a quick, not a detailed brief, but just so you have an awareness. If you're going to advocate for a result in the upcoming referendum, and you're going to spend money, and you're going to receive money, you have to register as a third-party advertiser, okay? The maximum amount anybody can donate as an Albertan or an Alberta company throughout the entirety of the campaign is $5,000. So if there's some rich guy, he cannot give 5,000 to one group and 5,000 to give 1,000 to 5 groups, 5,000 total. The most that a group can receive and spend is $600,000. Why is it that Jason Kenney and this new group that the Solbergs just started didn't just help Forever Canada? Because they want to be able to spend 1.2 million. That's why, right? So they're going to have 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 different groups so that they can focus their energies and advance on the battlefield. And the independent side needs to do the same thing. This is not something that's capable of one super group because of the election finance laws.
We will take questions. If you want to state your name and if you've got an organization, that would be great. And if you'd like to direct your question at a particular person.
Thank you. I'm John Williams. I own Alberta Public Affairs, and it's for both of you. It's going to take a minute to frame this, but it's going to be worthwhile. One of the most important things is what's happening right now. Ontario, Quebec traditionally didn't have a clue that was going on in Alberta. If they stood on the top of the CN Tower and they didn't see it, they didn't know about it, they didn't care about it. What's happening now is enlightening them. So we're starting, and we're coming up with a fourth, okay? So one of the most important things is separation is educating them now. No matter what happens, the premier of this province is moving the needle. But we have to remember the premier, the government, and the UCP cannot push separation. The premier's opened the door. The people in this room and our friends have to drive it across the room. And when we've got extremists trying to do it, it won't win. An extremist never wins. We've got to focus on commonalities, and we have to focus on moving this forward, working together and educating people. Now, people will drive this and it'll happen. I held an event at the Ranchman's Club during the Canadian Conservative Convention of every single major influencer. It was epic. We're going to bring them back because we're going to get them involved, because right now the mainstream media does not help us. We're going to own the narrative for once, because conservatives were always chasing it. So I want people to help out on this. And we got to make sure we share the story the way it is so that we're owning it, not chasing it. Now, there's talk about people taking over the party. That's not going to help anything. That's going to divide conservatives. We've got to stop eating our own, and I'm going to come to a question in a minute with this. But the most important thing is everybody has to get involved, get your family and friends involved, educate yourselves, because we have a game-changing opportunity here, and we don't want to miss the bus. We've got to participate in our democracy. We've got to work together, but the extremists aren't going to do it. So the next step, like I said, these third-party advertisers are going to make a difference, but we have to work together, because what you're talking about, Fergus, is how do we work together like a corporation? How do we do it from a moderate point of view? Because if you run from the left, you govern from the center. If you run from the right, you govern from the center. You'll stay in power forever. You can't stick to the far left or the far right. So we have to work with everybody together. And we got a group of people in this room that are making things happen through a moderate and amazing approach, but we got to continue doing that. So I would like to ask Eva and Kevin, how do we best accomplish this so we're doing this from a common sense point of view, so the media doesn't say, these guys are a bunch of whack jobs. Let's come to it as passionate Albertans that want to see things change. No matter what happens, we're going to come out ahead, further ahead than we were. Premier Danielle Smith is not the enemy. She's not going anywhere. We got to make sure she stays there. Our job is to drive things forward. How are we going to see that happen?
In litigation, when you're doing a deposition or examinations for discovery and a lawyer asks your client the same question twice, you say asked and answered. I've already answered that, my friend. I think we got to do all the things that I said earlier. That's the bottom line, is we cannot stay in our echo chambers. I love social media influencers. They are not going to save us, John, because the people we need to reach aren't watching them. So we need to break out of our echo chambers. It's a good dopamine rush. Oh, wow, that video got 20,000 views, but it's 20,000 people are already voting for independence. So we got to break out of that. We got to use the normal campaign methods to reach the people where they are.
Can I?
Have you been out of the country? So you didn't see the countdown how many days since there was a big social media campaign where I called out the passing third debate, and we had these posters and each day that the passing didn't respond.
But also why? I think that this is our opportunity to speak and make our voices louder and better. And I very much agree. There's an opportunity to go outside of our echo chambers. Like I said, I'm going to be going on campus. I just decided today to go there. And that's where we need to be. And the traditional campaigning methods like door knocking. And let me tell you, I'm planning to go, but I am a little bit nervous because this isn't just a regular election campaign. This is very emotional for people, but I think we have to be there, be rational with people, just ask questions, engage in a very respectful conversation. Why is it that you feel that way? Explain to me so I understand it better, and maybe I could explain to you where I'm coming from. But how I see it is we're 30% for separation, 30% is never going to entertain, but there's 30% in the middle that is really wanting some answers, that they have no idea what's going on because this issue has gotten so confused and so divisive. And that was one difficulty I had with Kenney today. He's like, this is going to be so divisive. And I'm like, man, you're causing most of this division yourself. You're the one name calling, and you're a former premier. Like, maybe you could elevate the conversation a little bit. But that's up to us in this room when we're talking to people to do that. So that's what I would encourage people to do as well.
I'll just give a comment on that. In terms of making this seem like a more moderate movement, even though many of us are passionate, the more we can move in the right direction, such that this is a turnkey operation when this happens, the less it'll seem like a radical change. So all the incremental movements in that direction now, I think, are healthy, okay?
Hello, I'm Tina Clemens. You might know me by my super cool handle of Farm Geek. When I'm talking to Albertans, the major opposition I hear to Alberta independence stems from either a patriotism for Canada that they believed they knew, a fear of something new, or even just general apathy to politics. What they need is exactly what this Alberta Transition Council will deliver. So this is kind of for you, Keith, because Kenney in the debate and in his usual mode of fear-mongering stated that negotiations could take years or even decades. Can you elaborate on the timeline and the complexity of these negotiations with Canada?
Okay, well, first of all, the Alberta Transition Council, you know, as Dennis noted, my co-lead, it's only one piece of the puzzle. You know, we all know many people that have said, well, what's the monetary policy going to be? What kind of trade agreements are you going to have? How are you going to provide for continuity of air service? And these are all absolutely proper questions. And you know, I'm a trade unionist. Is my Red Seal certificate still going to be recognized in Saskatchewan, or can I go on a shutdown in BC? So we need to have all those answers for those questions. So that's the purpose of the Alberta Transition Council. Dennis and I have a joke when we summarize what the Alberta Transition Council's about. It's about a bunch of old, smart people just figuring out how to make it work, right? No drama, just very mechanical. But there's an element that we have to reach that's interested in that. But let me give you an example. The polling that Ezra Levant had recently had done suggested that a lot of people who are on the fence actually didn't want those details. That completely threw me. But then someone pointed out to me, and it caused me to understand what they meant. So years ago, FedEx did a new ad campaign on television where the commercial showed your package being dropped off at a FedEx store, following it on the truck to a sort center on conveyors, up a thing, and 15 guys handling it, and then onto an airplane to another sort center, and blah, 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 you know, and it's my mom's ashes, I'm sending them to my brother, you know, and it's like their sales dropped by 12% overnight. So they abandoned the ad campaign and they replaced it with an ad that said, we'll get your parcel where it needs to be. This proposed terms, here's what we'll pay you for the national parks, here's what we'll pay you for the army bases. We're not antique collectors, so take your equipment out first, please. And here's how much you owe us for the pensions, and a term sheet can be prepared. I know this sounds ambitious, but either we're going to have good faith negotiations or we're not. And that's the requirement, is that they enter into good faith negotiations. To answer Dr. Cooper's question, the Supreme Court of Canada decision on Quebec succession was 1998. The Clarity Act was in the year 2000. The federal government did not like a lot of things the court said, so they put additional restrictions in through statute. So for example, the federal government, or the Supreme Court of Canada, did not say that for a question to be valid, it has to be approved by the House of Commons. They said nothing about that at all. They just said it has to be a clear question. And so as soon as the Clarity Act was brought in, just so you know the legal hierarchy, if there's a conflict between the Supreme Court of Canada decision and the Clarity Act, the Supreme Court of Canada decision trumps. When the Clarity Act was introduced in 2000, the Quebec legislature passed a resolution, I think it's Bill 99, said, you can't do this, we're not listening to you, we're following the Supreme Court of Canada decision, Quebecers will decide our future, you won't, what you're saying is not legal. And in fact, I just saw a clip where someone, either some Quebec politician, stood up today and restated that. That's where that, last week you would have saw the clip about the 51%. So that's where all that comes from. So the Clarity Act is a legal construct by the federal government that in many respects is unconstitutional because it's inconsistent with the Supreme Court of Canada decision and its attempt by Ottawa to get greater control. So it's my view that the Alberta government is not required to submit the question in advance to Ottawa for approval. If they did and Ottawa said no, to me that would be bad faith negotiating by the federal government. They're under positive legal duty to engage in good faith negotiations. So it seems to me that the proper step is that Alberta, at the appropriate time, after the clear question, clear vote, should present the term sheet, tell Ottawa, come here, meet with us in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Let's negotiate this out. Of course, Ottawa won't come and they'll bring legal challenges. And they'll do all kinds of other things. Give them a reasonable amount of time, again, make the offer, and then at some point you give them a deadline and you say, if you don't approve, either accept our proposed terms or counteroffer us and let's reach an agreement, failure of which in 30 days, we, the government of Alberta, the people of Alberta, will be exercising our right of self-determination and announcing a unilateral declaration of independence. And then we'll be looking for international recognition. When the Supreme Court of Canada made its decision, they did not anticipate a Donald Trump. They did not anticipate that the Canadian government would decide to align itself with China and the Communist Party of China. They did not anticipate, I think, the geopolitical dynamics that we have today. We know that Prime Minister Carney in September of 2025 took the bizarre step. I mean, I couldn't even breathe for like 2 minutes. My mouth was just wide open, was when he refreshed the international doctrine of unilateral recognition by another nation state when he recognized the state of Palestine. They don't even define border. So he's really cleared the way for the Trump administration at the right time to recognize. My understanding is there's at least 20 countries that are prepared to recognize Alberta as a nation state, to recognize the right of self-determination of a free people, to freeing itself from colonial oppression, which is essentially what we have in Ottawa, in my view. And what's so remarkable about our facts, if there was, it's not like our economy's tied to 4 different countries and it's 25%, 25%. 90% of our trade goes to the United States. And it's just not any country. They're not just struggling along. It's the largest economy in the world. Like, did we hit a lottery ticket or what? So they're going to recognize us. The most important thing, if we had trade disrupted to the United States, scenario A, and trade disrupted with Ottawa, which one's going to hurt us more? So and Premier Kenney was like, what was he trying to say today? That's the first time I heard that one. Because they own TMX, they'll turn off the pipe. And I'm like, well, we'll beat you to it. There won't be oil and gas going into it. And that's why I brought up what Lougheed did, whatever. So this is on its face complex, but I really think at the end of the day, it need not be. We've got the cards. We've got the 3rd largest reserve of oil. We've got the relationship with the largest economy in the world.
Yeah.
And I'll just add a little bit, but that threat by that was just over the top things that we were showing off, because just exposing why the relationship is broken. But Tanya, to your point about the fear, and this is for people that don't want to know how this messages me. How I explained it to a few people is we have kind of incompetent government now, and with Ottawa, and we could have possibly incompetent government in Alberta or better government in Alberta. So perhaps let's take that chance. There is the answer.
Ready? Hi, everybody. My name's Adam Burgess. I have a podcast called Living Great Men, and so I've been lucky enough to have Pete and Kenney on together actually a couple times. So anyway, before I ask my question, I just want to start with gratitude. I think one of the things that frustrates me about this movement is there are a lot of people who are pushing to be leaders, and you can tell that it's for their own personal gain. And Keith, I know for a fact that what you're doing is coming at personal sacrifice. You're a reluctant leader. You're reluctant to be pushed into the spotlight that you're in. I just want to start with some gratitude. I don't know just what you're doing. I don't know why you're doing it. So thank you for that. Okay, on to my question. So I think me, and I think probably most of us, when we first saw the change to the referendum question, I think a lot of us were a little surprised and a little upset at first. But the more I thought about it, the more I actually think that it gives us the best chance to win. The people who want this referendum right this minute aren't necessarily thinking about, well, like, do you want to write this minute? You're going to win, right? And one of the things that I think it gives us an opportunity for, and I want you to share why you think it might be positive, that we get from it. One of the things I really like about it is that it's going to give people an opportunity to be brave, right? One of the things that we learned from COVID was they tricked us into being fearful by tricking us into thinking we're isolated, right? That there were only a few of us, and you know, Tamara Litch is here. Wherever Tamara is, speaking of gratitude, thanks for your birthday. But they tricked us into thinking that it was just a few crazy people that weren't getting vaccinated, right? And then you find out later, like, wait a second, a lot of us were. Why weren't we talking? Well, they tricked us into being quiet. And I think that this kind of stepping stone, like this first referendum to have a referendum, we can sell enough positives on why having a referendum is a good thing for Alberta in terms of negotiating things like that. And I view it as a bit of a stepping stone. And I hope that what comes from that is some contagious bravery. Because if we convince enough people to say, you know what, we don't need to vote yes or no right now. Let's just all agree that a vote would be good for us. And I think that potentially the bravery that will come from that when we win the first stage, if we win with a big number, it might make people a little more brave. So my question for you is this: what other things are you going to do to inspire bravery and to convince more people to be brave enough to tell their friends and family this is what you're doing? And then I would also love to hear any other potential wins and benefits that you think this version of the question could bring, as opposed to the one that we thought we were going to get on.
Would you please say your podcast again, sir?
Yeah, it's called The Army of Great Men.
Army of Great Men. Okay.
I didn't write the question down, and I see Keith is doing that. So in terms of bravery, I don't have tips except for just do it. Like, that's my motto. I jump into the fire. I just quickly will say the story, since you mentioned the convoy, as Keith and I were both asked to go, and Keith didn't really debate it, but he recognized there would probably be some consequences, and I was just like, send me in, coach. That's me. That's how I am. I don't really think about the consequences. I think it's because I feel I'm doing the right thing. And so when I feel confident in what I'm doing, I don't really worry about the consequences. So I encourage all of you to recognize that. If you think this is the right track and you believe in it, there is nothing to fear. Just do. And I think that kind of confidence inspires bravery in others. So that would be my response to that one. You can go with
The my objective assessment on Thursday was that the Premier was boxed in, and she wanted to be responsive to the over 700,000 Albertans that said they wanted a referendum. I believe that she believes fundamentally in direct democracy. If she had made the question up-down, even though it would have been a question set under the Referendum Act through the discretion of the cabinet, it still would have likely been challenged. And even though there would have been no proper legal basis to overturn it, it would have got put on ice, just like there was no basis whatsoever for the initial decision from the court on Mitch-Sylvester number 1, nor on Mitch-Sylvester number 2. So when I game it out, it's okay. If she would have done an up-down question, blended Mitch's with Lukaszik's, that would have immediately got put on hold, and the entire energy would have been stopped. Now, so the question, as complicated as is, and remember, this is not a yes/no question. Would you like coffee or tea? Yes. Well, obviously that's not a helpful answer. So it'll be, the question is stay, and it'll be A, stay in Canada, require the Alberta government to commence an independence vote, B, commence independence vote. So that's how it'll be structured, and that should have been more clear, I think, when the government announced it. People were like, how do I vote to this? I mean, yeah, coffee or tea? Yes. No. Well, do you want coffee or tea? No. So, let's swallow there, too much enthusiasm. So I really do think she was boxed in. What I like about this question, and I like it a lot, is number one, despite the echo chamber within our movement was, we're absolutely good and ready and we're going to smash this. Wrong. It would have been absolute catastrophic failure. And that would have been terrible. Number two, and this is the more important point, we know that the polling is showing that there's a lot of people who want to vote to stay, but those people also, a lot of them, have fundamental concerns about how Alberta's being treated, Alberta's place in Confederation, and the fairness coming out of Ottawa, and they'd like to see change. So take that hypothetical person, and there's two scenarios. Scenario A, the only choice they have is to vote stay or leave. They're going to vote stay. Now you have scenario B. They can vote stay, or they can vote, let's have a referendum on independence, right? It's a way for them to say, I am not happy with how Ottawa's treating Alberta. I'm not happy with Alberta's place in Confederation. So I think just because of the structure of the question, given where things are at, given the polling, even hopefully it'll be much better come October, we're far more likely to get more votes. And then I believe it's reasonable for the question to be put on the ballot in February or March. And just so everybody's clear, there's confusion about this, there is no blackout. The blackout period of 1 year, you can't have a question, that's under the Citizen Initiative Act, not the Referendum Act. I triple checked it. That was my understanding, but I triple checked it. So there is no blackout. There's a blackout for a new Citizen Initiative petition in a year before an election, but not for a referendum. They can call a referendum to be held the day before a provincial election. There's no restriction. So I think February, March, and then it'll be a singly focused ballot. One question: should Alberta remain in Canada, or should Alberta become an independent country? So being a litigator, I take the facts as I get them. You know, could you imagine a client comes to me and says, I got this big problem, I'm in this lawsuit, and I just did these 5 things. Well, undo them. You know, like I just have to say, well, that was really stupid, but I guess that's what I got. You know, so I'm not saying this was stupid. I'm saying I'm just used as a litigator to taking the facts and the client as it's presented, and you try and make it work. So net, I do actually think this has turned into a bit of an opportunity because it provides us an opportunity to get organized and do a proper campaign to reach those people. And it makes the choice for those who would right now, gives an alternative for someone who's unhappy with Ottawa, but not yet prepared to support independence.
Hi, my name is David Burns. I'm just here, and I'm grateful to be here, actually. Thank you very much. I have a question. Do we need to broaden the discussion from beyond Alberta's interest to the reason we're getting engaged in this is to have responsible and responsive government? And I would argue that one of the reasons you got as much attendance on the podcast that you did is precisely because more than just people in Alberta are interested in responsible and responsive government. That if you look throughout the West, I was at a Cornerstone Forum discussion about history, and a bunch of Northern Ontarians were there, and they were saying, you know, we really don't like what's going on in Toronto. But just like you guys out in Alberta, we get voted out all the time, and we don't really see ourselves represented by Parliament today. And do we need to take the argument a little further to say that the reason we are doing this is not because we don't love Canada, not because we don't think this country is a great place to be and that it doesn't have amazing potential that for one reason or another is not being utilized, but because the country simply is no longer working and hasn't for a long time, and we need to stand up for the sake of everybody in Canada as well as the people of Alberta. I think when we focus on, you know, the whole idea of we're doing this because we're being robbed, that polarizes everything. And so I'm just curious what your take is on that perspective.
I always want to turn that question on you, sir, because obviously I'm here because I believe this is a real choke point or trigger point for broader change beyond Alberta. Not only that, I believe it is realistic, right? So I wouldn't be putting my reputation on the line or coming up here if I didn't believe it was realistic. So, but let's say we assume that there are lots of other movements around the world that favor this, right? That, let's say, a part of Oregon wants to secede and become a part of another state, or become a new state, or California. I mean, I'm not sure how we're going to engage with that. I mean, it seems like a distraction to some degree.
I would say this, that there's some people, particularly in other provinces, that believe, Professor Party's one of them, that Alberta moving towards independence might save Canada, right? But I think we have a pretty big job in front of us here in Alberta, and I'd like to leave it for those voices in other provinces that believe that, to focus on that messaging. And I think we need to carry our own water and let them carry theirs, would be my answer.
One small thing I would add is I feel that you're only as strong as your weakest link. So I think that by Alberta becoming stronger, I think it can be an example for other provinces in Alberta. So you could flip that on its head as well, that it's not abandoning, for example, Canada, but the relationship is just not working very well. And people are taking advantage of Alberta's revenue. And so instead it could be a better relationship across Canada. That's how I see it.
Hi, my name's Wayne Wells. So, my first statement is, I was watching Corey Morgan the other day, and he had a list of 50 reasons why we can't become independent. And my favorite one out of that list of 50 is we won't have a Coast Guard. So my question to you is, I watched the Briax movie of how Briax transposed, and a lot of that was the birth of social media. One of the gentlemen who helped them really was on social media, and he did a lot of work to persuade that movement, from what I gather. My question to you today is, Carney was just on the news when I was coming here, because I have to listen to the crappy mainstream media. He said the people in England are still not happy with the Brexit movement, or the whatever in the heck it's called. So comment on that.
I saw that movie too, and all the parties will be utilizing social media and some of the data mining activities and the ability to put specific messages on specific phones tied to the person's demographic. But what really struck me about, and as I've studied Brexit, is look at their economy, right? So the British economy, it's not a resource economy, that's for sure. And they were trying to get back to what they had before, where they weren't overlorded by the thousands of bureaucrats in Brussels and all these regulations on top of regulations on top of rules. Our situation is so fundamentally different. We have the third largest reserve of oil in the world. We have incredible agricultural product and capabilities. We have a diversified economy, and we just want to be set free. They really didn't have most of their exports after Brexit were still going to European Union. What our situation is so different because we have markets that want our product, but Ottawa constrains it for ideological reasons. So I think that's where the comparison breaks down.
I'm Angela Tabak. I'm one of the co-founders of the Alberta Women's Independence Network. And Kathy Flagg made me promise that I would tell you all that she's so sorry she can't be here tonight. She's actually in Saskatchewan with Corey Morgan and Mitch Sylvester and doing that this weekend. I'm seeing some really great results, and we're excited to start to kind of coordinate with the women out there as well. So we've been approached to do that, so I'm really excited. But I have two questions about the Alberta's next step. I'm totally intrigued about that. Will this be a third-party advertiser? Is that how it's being set up? Okay. That's question one. So question two is, you mentioned there's going to be campaign strategy tools available. My tiny little organization is talking about setting up as a third-party advertiser. We believe that that's going to be something that we're going to need to do. Will there be a way that we can coordinate our efforts? No? Can you explain that? And kind of give us an idea of how this works.
Can I explain a butterfly reorganization and capital gains exemption strategy instead?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. These rules are crazy. So the short answer is there's an anti-collusion provision. So you're not allowed to collude. But the intention of it, it sounds good in theory, but it's the execution just gets muddled immediately, which is they don't want somebody, and it's not so applicable. They don't want to have a situation where one group has access to $1 million and goes to spend it, realizes they can only spend 600,000. So says, oh, well, let's just set up a second group and, we'll divide our campaign office into two, and on the right side of the room will be this campaign and the left, right? So they don't want collusion. The phrasing is the third-party advertisers cannot collude to exceed the spending limit. So each group needs to maintain a degree of separation, right? But how does that work? I was talking to a podcaster today, and I said, could you imagine if they set one up and I set one up, and I happened to bump into him at Costco, and I said, hey, Bob, what are you doing? He's like, I just set up through it. I go, no way, I did too. Okay, you go that way, I'll go this way. You do the express checkout, I'll go this way. Where do you park? Because we don't want to be like, what is Elections Alberta expecting us to do? We're all motivated by the same thing. So I know. So it's so strange. So it's just the groups are going to have to be careful that, if you put your material up on a website, obviously anybody can go there and get it. If it's a PDF, anybody can download it. So, but active coordination, collaboration for the purpose of exceeding the spending limit is not allowed. What's allowed under that's all murky. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Can't you collude now before the writ drops? Technically, yes. I heard that answer.
Brett Owen, CEO of Bob Ellicurdy. I'd like to hear about that capital gains exemption. Oh, okay. Talk about it. You even saw it tonight in the debate. Your arguments were very logical, very rational, and Kenney's were very emotional. So, you talk to a lot of people that are around for the Quebec separation. They say it was driven by emotion at the end of the day. And so, do you have any sort of reaction to they keep on coming at us with a very emotional response? We keep on coming at them with a very logical response. How do you square that circle to overcome that emotion to meet in the middle, if you will?
I want to respond to that one just briefly. I think this can be a winner for Alberta. I really think that the Alberta identity is one that can pull at the heartstrings, right? And especially if we portray Ottawa as an imperial or parasitic city that is lessening, let's say, does not have appeal. I think the big problem, and the previous man mentioned Brexit, it was almost like the flip side there where people voted for the emotion, right, for the new Union Jack. And so we have to be careful about attacking the Maple Leaf because, of course, people still have nostalgia for that. However, to me, the cowboy pioneer image of Alberta is incredibly attractive as a brand, as an identity. So I think that, to me, it pulls at my heartstrings, right? I grew up in a rural area. I feel like I relate to that. And I think many people here feel more kinship with that than with Ottawa. So I don't see it necessarily being tense unless we start attacking the Maple Leaf.
we have to use emotion too. I can imagine many different types of ads and things that we can do, because the reality is Ottawa's causing hardship. They're doing some bad stuff. And, I don't see it as my role, given that whatever that is, to be the emotional person. I'm trying to show, and have been for the last year, that this is a sensible proposition. There's a legal pathway. It makes a lot of sense. But that I fully support. We're going to have to use all the tools. And it is an emotional thing. Our kids are being held back. It's real. Cost of living, all the things they talk about. So no, we absolutely, the different groups will have to tell the emotional story as well.
I just want to refer, we have a lady here, Tamara Lich. I feel emotional having her here, a hero of Canadians.
And I was just going to add, you can use emotion, and I think it's important, but also confidence trumps fear. Tamara Leach, we're just talking about, she's a little lady, but she's damn confident. So I think that's what we need too, is we need to be confident in what we're talking about, confident in what we're advocating for, because that the fear will go away. And to me, listening to a former premier of the province of Alberta use fear is embarrassing to me. And I think we should call it out for that. Like, he was governing the province, and now the only response he has is to invoke fear on his citizens. We should be able to laugh at that, confidently laugh at that.
So, my name's Brendan. Calgary. I have a question to you two, and two for Mr. Wilson. So first, Ms. Chipiak, number one. If I had to fight your husband in the octagon, would I last 15 seconds or 18? That's your question. You gentlemen in the middle, if you had to, would you fight a kangaroo or potentially a ocelot? And Mr. Wilson, two questions for you, if you may. The first one is, I don't even remember what the first one is, but the second one is this, is with respect to the whole separation referendum, if everything goes south and all of the questions asked end up answering in a majority, and still the Canadian government refuses to negotiate and allow Canada out, what then? Kangaroo, by the way?
I don't know what the fossil is. I don't know what that is. Okay, well, kangaroos are dangerous, actually. Yeah. I'll take the second.
How many seconds? 3. Oh, now I forgot your question. What was it? Oh, right. Well, Brendan, is paragraph 155 of the Supreme Court of Canada decision addresses that, and to an extent, and it acknowledges and recognizes that the possibility that there could be a breakdown and not good faith negotiations, and that's where the phrase unconstitutional unilateral declaration of independence comes from. So, and what's interesting about it, as you probably know, my learned friend, that, yeah, I was more interested in the cage match one, but I think Adam's estimate was right. But is there's an international law concept of nation states recognizing a people that exercise the right of self-determination to declare themselves a nation. Since 1990, there's been 41 new nations formed. Since 1990, there's been 41 new countries. The world's not going to go, no way, a new country, right? That hasn't happened for 1,000 years. So, and the circumstances in international law where it can be acknowledged is in part where peoples are treated as a colony. They've been colonized. They're being exploitation, where they're exploited and they have no representation. And there's some elements of that to our relationship with Ottawa. So it will be open to the international community to decide to recognize, just like Prime Minister Carney did in September with the state of Palestine. They said to this nation state of Israel, we are declaring this part our country, and although they can't really show where the boundary is, but whatever, and we're a peoples and we're exercising a right of self-determination. And Prime Minister Carney said Canada's recognizing. Alberta's got a far better case.
I just agree with Keith's observation there. At some point, Alberta will have to just say, no, we ain't doing this, and we're not going to ask for permission forever. We're going over time. Last question. I feel terrible. That's a good one here. Okay.
Mine will take about 27
seconds.
Now we talk about the arguments. We talk about the emotional versus the logical. And when we see the attacks on the Premier is attacking the federal government. But the reality is what we're seeing across Canada. So I play a little bit with math. And sorry, my name is Sheldon. I'm the ACSAC. I also produce the Haver Uplay show. HAVERUPLAY.com. In Canada right now, and this is over the last 6 years, homelessness has increased by 303%. So that's not double, it's not triple, that's quadrupled plus 3%. Now, when the Premier brings up problems with the federal government, she's talking about a lot of different problems. They're throwing it back in the province. When we talk about the mortality inside of Canada, we're talking about 24,000 people that died in 2024 waiting for a doctor. That's not an Alberta problem. That's a Canada-wide problem. When we see 17 people per hour, per day, and this is statistics from Q1 2026, so January, February, March, that's 17 people per hour, per day. Not in Alberta. This is across Canada, going insolvent. These are the emotional things that people can understand. Nobody likes statistics. Nobody likes math. Except me.
Sir, your question, sir.
Me and Brian.
Sir, your question?
To the question. So if we're going to be reaching out on an emotional level, and we're going to be reaching out with logistics or logical conclusions, I do see the law. I do see the path forward. I support all of that. But how many people are actually focusing? And again, to Keith Wilson's point, sorry, Mr. Wilson, we're going to be engaging with a lot of people, but how are we going to get the statistics out in front of these people? Because each voice is small. What sort of ideas are we going to implement to not just try and get the messages out there, but to try and band a lot of other voices in with the local statistics to try and make this as the case? If I go to somebody's house and I say, are you for separation or not? And then I get to say to them, 17 people per hour are going insolvent. Right now, across the country, 1 in 3 children are going to bed hungry. Inside of Alberta, that's 35%. Meanwhile, we send $20 billion to
So
other
Sheldon,
provinces.
So what you do is you do polling and you figure out the groups of people that are already voting for you, the ones that are on the fence and the ones that are opposed to you. No, you're wrong. It's 60. We're worse than that. It's not anyway. I've studied the polls and the poll that our side commissioned so that it wasn't a political poll. In any event, bear with me. You can disagree, treat my words as hypothetical then. Which is, you then take that middle group that's waffling. You say, why are you waffling? You focus group them. and then you find out what their issues are. And then you figure out, then you message them, you take another of that group, and then you message test on them. And you say, okay, well, what, are you familiar with YouTube, how it will give you 3 different screenshots for your thumbnails for your video? Yeah, AI does it, right? And it figures out what the viewership's most interested in, and that makes that your thumbnail, and it gets more engagement, right? It's the same kind of concept. So you figure out what messaging causes a person who's a maybe and shifts them over to a yes. And it might very well be concerns about healthcare. I don't know. It might be immigration, it might be crime. And then you go to the other group, you focus group them, and you message test them. You use the science of campaigning, the science of polling, to make sure your messaging is hitting the audience to cause the target audience to shift in your favor. You don't do little engine that could. You don't do what? No, we're not. You're not hearing me, my friend. So this is not something you can look in the mirror and think a lot about and figure out by yourself, no matter how smart you are. Because what you don't know what other people think. I don't know what other people think. I was shocked at some of the things that came out of that poll. So counterintuitive to me. I would have never guessed them.
Yeah, isn't it the Rebel News? Yeah, but it's widely spread. I mean, I've seen lots of the data too, but okay. Final person, please.
Thanks. Last question. I'm Angela. I'm Jeff Tabak. I'm Angela Tabak's husband. All I do is keep her stress low so she can get the word out and be all positive from there. Real quick question. Is the change of wording of Danielle Smith to me looks positive, because beforehand, when the courts basically would say that it has to be majority, it could be 60%. We don't know what the number is. But this question, let me ask you if I'm looking at this right. But this question is basically saying if we're at 50 plus 1 vote, then it moves on to the next level back in April or May or March and February. Once we are able to show that we have 50% plus 1, that does break the ice with a lot of people. And I look at this as very, very positive for us getting the word out. I just want to hear your quick points.
Well, I definitely think it allows time, and it is a little bit of an easier question than that binary yes, no, as Keith was talking about. My frustration only with the question was is that, darned it, if we want to have what Quebec has, let's act like Quebec is. And that was my only frustration with it, because Quebec doesn't ask if it can ask the question, it just asks the question, and then people can decide. But the issue has gotten so incredibly confused, so it does give people time to get educated and on board, and a bit more time to strategize on the messaging and have a little bit of a softer question for our delicate Albertans out there.
Yeah. Just one point Keith made, which I think is important, is that no one alone has all the knowledge as to how to answer these challenges, and that's why. I mean, like I said today, I was hoping it to be somewhat of a brainstorming session. We're crowdsourcing our insights and doing more than anyone can. So I hope that we continue that and have dialogue between the people here. I really appreciate everyone coming tonight. It was a risk to put this on. I don't know what response I would get, but everyone has shown such incredible support. I would like to mention Benita Peterson for incredible. And if people are not already, please follow Critical Compass on YouTube. They're incredible. I also had, I won't mention his name because maybe he wants to do it in private, but the support of someone who can be at home to stay here in Calgary, which is great. Now, okay, I mean, that's all we've got for you. I hope you frequent the store at the back, Alberta Tea Company, T-shirt company, and we've got books for sale also. Thanks for coming out, everybody.
I'd just like to highlight a couple of products in the store at the back. So one of the items is this sweater here. And the main reason I think you should purchase this sweater is because it says 10/19/26. And there's gonna be people who look at this sweater and go, why are you wearing a sweater that reads 10?
How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
You're good with the Rebel News now?
Yes, I am.
That's good.
Yeah.
We're so excited for you. Yeah. And you're no longer locked in the playpen?
I am. I'm
Oh,
still under
still.
house arrest. I'm only allowed out for work, church, community service while volunteering now. And
One of them I'd like to highlight is actually this one. Could you talk about that for a
necessities of
second?
life. And necessities of life.
Necessities of life.
It's relevant.
We're so grateful that you're here.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm
I
happy
had
to be
no
here.
idea we have this rising movement. I was wondering to see this.
We haven't.
And we've come so
We need to do that.
You still have my number, but anyways, yeah, I just launched a lawsuit. I just launched a
You know,
lawsuit.
so basically this book is written
I launched a
from
civil, I
the
launched a civil
conflict
suit.
experience. That I just wanted to say, welcome to your personal level, rather than waiting for politicians.
Wow.
The Attorney General's Office of Ontario and King Charles and Right of Ontario
Nice.
for malicious prosecution and
And
negligence.
how about a big round of applause
Good
for
God, that's
all
awesome.
our presenters and our host, Fergus Hodgson. Enjoy, make sure to listen to Stir at the back.
All right, this is Bruce Show. This is Unscrew the News. And last, let's stay sane together, keep your head on a swivel. And this is Bruce Show. All right, you guys. Well, you know what? I don't know if I'm going to be able to get another interview, but let's see if we can. All right. Anyway, you guys, God bless you. Have a great night. Take care. Thank you so much for watching Unscrew the News. I appreciate you.